Hi. So I'm going to go ahead and do a video today to walk you through the lesson. Make sure that you're following along. You're going to need your dry erase board out of your desk and your marker. So please locate those things very quickly, and we're going to get started. All right, so we have been talking all about integers, about the positive, about the negative integers. And today I'm going to introduce you to a new word, rational number. And that's our big idea for this last lesson that we're going to study before our math test. So you guys will have a math test on Friday over integers and these rational numbers. We're going to take this rational number lesson very slow. So today is just an introduction of what a rational number is and learning to work with that. We'll continue this lesson on Tuesday and also on Wednesday. So today, here's going to be our big goal with understanding rational numbers. We're going to have to work on writing rational numbers in the same form and then graphing them on a number line. So here's the question that we probably need to ask ourselves first is, what is a rational number? So think about that for just a second. A number leads us to think it's probably going to be an integer, meaning it could be a positive or negative if we're thinking about the number line. When this word rational comes in, this tells us that it could be any number on that number line. So far, when we've thought about a number on the number line, we've had 0, we've had -1, +1, +2, -2. And this is what our number line has looked like. These are integers. When we throw in that rational number, these are the points that may be in between those integers. A rational number is going to be any number, positive or negative, that falls on that number line. So this is where we're going to get into our fractions and our decimals. It has to be a number, though, when you're thinking about a decimal, that does not repeat. It has a definite spot on the number line. Okay, so no repeating decimals. We're going to have decimals or fractions that we're going to be working with these positive and negative rational numbers. So let's work on that first goal. We need to be able to write these rational numbers in the same form. And this is where you're going to need your dry erase board. So when we go to compare rational numbers, just like we've compared integers, we're trying to put these on our number line. So we need them in the same form. Otherwise, we don't know where they belong. So there's two ways to do this, two forms of this number. You can either make them both fractions, or you can convert them both into decimals. And I'm going to kind of walk you through this first one. You can do it with me on your dry erase board if you'd like. So here's the first example. Let's make them both fractions. Well, think about the warm-up where you had to round to the nearest place value. That was either the tenths or the hundredths, which those are the places that we're talking about when we read this decimal number. So fractions mean I can leave this as 1/4. But when I look at this, I have to think about how would I read that? And this would be 75 hundredths because I have tenths and this 5 is in the hundredths place. So to write that, I would write 75 hundredths. Now, obviously, these numbers are still not the same because the denominators aren't the same. So I can't compare them. However, I can make this fraction smaller and reduce it, or find out what goes into both of those numbers to try and get it down to 4. So when I'm thinking, well, what goes into 100 4 times? I'm thinking, oh, my quarters. Quarters, 25. So if I divide 100 divided by 25, that'll be 4 times. And then I'm thinking, how many quarters does it take to make 75 cents? And that would be 3 of them. So this is 3/4. This is 1/4. These are going to be common fractions that you're going to want to think of with your quarters, because if you're thinking 75 cents, you need 3 out of your 4 quarters. Okay? So here they both are as fraction form. 3/4, 1/4. Now, if I don't want to make them both fractions, I could convert these both into decimals, which means my 0.75 stays. And here's what I've got to think about when I'm converting into decimals. I need to make this into this place value. So in this case, I can probably I'm left with 2 options. We know tenths and we know hundredths. Well, I don't know how to get a 4 to become a 10 on bottom, because 4 will not go into 10. However, I can make 4 into 100. To make 4 into 100, let's see, that would be 4 times 25 equals 100. So if I do the same thing to the top, 1 times 25 is just 25, which means 25 hundredths, or written as a decimal, it looks like this, 25 hundredths. So I have written both of these as fractions, and then I have made both of these decimals. Okay, that's going to be our first goal, is to make them the same form. Because if I'm putting them on the number line, I need them in the same form. And then later on in this lesson, we're going to be comparing them. That'll be more tomorrow's goal. So our job number 1 is to get them into the same form. All right, let's erase our board. Use that knowledge and let's work on this second one. So we have 2/5 and 0.8. So if I'm thinking both as fractions, here's my thought. 2/5 is already a fraction, so it can stay. 0.8, when I read that, that is 8/10. So I can make that a fraction, 8/10. And then I need to simplify it. I need to see what can go in to make this smaller and get this down to 5. Well, if I take 10 and I divide it by 2, that'll get me down to 5. And if I take 8 and divide it by 2, that'll get me to 4. Now I have 2 fractions that have the same denominator, so I'm going to be able to put them on the number line. Both as decimals. Here we go. So 2/5 is not a decimal, but 8/10 is. So when I think of this 2/5, I can make my 5 into tenths. So to do that, I'm going to take a 5 and multiply it by 2. 2, multiply it by 2. So I've got 4/10, or 0.4. Now I've made both of these as a decimal. Okay? I could have made this into 100ths if I wanted to, but if I can make it into a tenths, that's okay. 2/5 would go up to 100. It would just be a times 20. So it would actually be 0.40, which we know we can add those zeros or leave those zeros on there. So I chose to just go with tenths instead of going all the way up to hundredths, because 5 could make 8/10, and I could stop there. Okay? So then we could compare, because we have the same form. Denominators are shared on this side, and on this side we have decimals, and that's something we've also been working in with our warm-ups, is being able to compare those decimals. All right, now let's try one on your own. So go ahead and erase your dry erase board. And let's see how you do. Split your board in half. Here are your two numbers, 2 1/4 and -4.15. Let me help get you started. Remember, if you're trying to write these as fractions, your 2 1/4, you have a whole number that's going on the outside of this decimal. All right? Do some thinking on that, and if you will please pause the video so they can work for about 2 minutes. All right, now that you've had some thinking time, I'm going to have you get with a partner and see if you and your partner can come up with an idea. Which way did you come up with to get my numbers the same form? All right, so take your dry erase board with you. You've got 5. Find somebody that's holding the same color pencil as you. 4, 3, 2, 1. Find a partner very quickly. And now turn and discuss. All right, hopefully you and your partner were able to come up with some good ideas if you'll make your way back to your seats. If they need some more talk time, you're welcome to pause the video and give them a few more seconds. All right, so let's see if we can do it. Put them both as fractions. So 2 1/4 is already a fraction. So I'm not going to mess with that. But I need to work on this side. So -4, and this is 15 hundredths. So I'm going to stick 15 over 100. Now I have to ask myself, can I make this number smaller? Because I want to get this hundredths down to a 4. And when I think about that, I'm thinking, well, I could divide by 25, and that would take me down to 4. But here's where I'm going to run into the problem. I can't divide 15 by 25. So I think probably my easiest thing to do is to bring this one up to 100. So lots of you may have gotten to this point with the fractions and gotten stuck. And I understand why. So let's see if I can't make this side into 100 instead. So if I take 4 and I multiply it by 25, I'll get to 100. So that means if I take the top and multiply it by 25, I have 1 times 25 is 25. So here's my two fractions, 2 and 25 hundredths, and negative 4 and 15 hundredths. I know this isn't the simplest form. However, this keeps them both as fractions and both with the same denominator, which is going to be important to me when I want to put them on the number line or I want to compare them. So there's our fractions. Let's try our decimals. So I can leave the negative 4.15. It's already a decimal. And on this one, I need 2.14. Well, here's the problem. I cannot write, I don't know what 1/4 is as a decimal. So I've got to think about this 1/4. Can I make it into a 10? Well, 4 times, I don't know anything that'll give me 10, so it's going to have to be 100. And this is the same problem that we did over here on this side. 4 times 25 will get me to 100. So times 25 on the top, because whatever I do to the bottom, I have to do to the top. Remember that from simplifying your fractions. So then I get 25 hundredths, so 2.25. The shortcut is if you're thinking about quarters, because we know 4 quarters makes $1 and you only have 1, that's just 25 cents. But either way, here are my 2 decimals that I can now compare. Right? That went through at you when we had a whole number and a fraction, or a whole number that has a decimal place value after it. All right, let's try one more of these where we're getting our rational numbers in the same form. All right, so if you'll erase your dry erase board, we're going to try one more set of these. Here it is. Negative 0.9 and negative 1 4/5. All right, split your board in half and see if you can make both of these as a fraction and then both of these as a decimal. If you'll please pause the video and give them about 3 minutes to work. All right, so let's get a partner and discuss. Remember, discussion should not be what'd you get. You're discussing your process of how did you get yourself there, right? So take your board with you. This time, you're going to find a partner that has the same color socks as you have on. All right, you've got 5. Find your partner quickly. 4, 3, 2, 1. Grab a partner if you don't already have one and begin your discussion now. If they need more discussion time, you can go ahead and pause the video. If not, let's make our way back to our seats, please. All right, so let's discuss what you guys found out. So if I need these both as fractions, that means this one can stay. It is already a fraction, negative 1 4/5. This needs to be made into a decimal. So when I think my negative is going to stay, when I read this, I read it as 9/10. So I'm going to go ahead and go 9/10 as my fraction. Now, both of these are fractions, so my goal is met. And if you got that far, that's fantastic. However, if I'm going to compare them or put them on a number line, I'm going to need the same denominator. So when I'm looking at this, I can get 10 to go down to 5 by dividing by 2. The problem is 9 won't divide by 2. So I'm not going to move that one. Instead, I'm going to take this one up to 10. Because I know if I take 5 times 2, that'll get me to 10. And I also know that 4 times 2 will get me to 8. So now I have -1 and 8/10 that I can compare. Because both of them are fractions and both of them have a 10 in the denominator. So remember, that's going to be your key. When you're comparing these, you have to keep the denominators the same if you are doing fractions. Now, if you don't want to do fractions and mess with common denominators, then you can always change them both into decimals. And that's the second example here. We already have a decimal in 0.9. If we're looking at this one, I have a whole number 1 and -1. So I need a decimal point, 4/5. Well, none of my place values tell me fifths. So what I need to do is turn this fifth either into a 10 or 100. So I can talk about place value. Well, I'm going to do a 10 because it's just closest. 5 times 2 gets me to 10. If I do it to the bottom, I got to do it to the top. 4 times 2 is 8. So I have 8/10, which we write as 0.8. 8/10. So now I have 2 decimals that I can compare. All right? So hopefully you're getting the hang of this. We're going to do some more practice with it because you're going to need it as we put these now onto the number line. So if you'll grab your book and you can go ahead and put away your dry erase board and your marker, make sure you store them back into your baggie. All of my things, your dry erase board belongs back in your desk. Your dry erase marker needs to go back in your zipper bag. And then in your book, if you'll find page 216, 216. This is going to be the beginning of lesson 4-4. This is the last lesson that we will do before we take our test on Friday. And again, this lesson is going to be broken into lots of parts. So today is just the beginning. So on page 216, you should see example 1. And it says, graph the set of rational numbers on the number line. So let's walk through this doing the same thing that we just did. So my first decision has to be, I need to change these into the same form. So looking at these, I can either make them all fractions or I can make them all decimals. And that's going to have to be your first decision when you look at this. Do I want to do fractions or if I want to do decimals? So I'm just going to kind of split this in half. And this is going to be my fraction side. This is going to be my decimal side. Whichever one you like, you're welcome to do it. There's no right or wrong answer here. So let's try fractions first. So this is -1/5. That can stay like that. And then this is 2 3/4. That one can stay, or 3/5, I'm sorry. That one can stay like that. It's a fraction. However, I have -7/10. That's now a fraction. And -1 8/10. That's now a fraction. Here's where using fractions is just a little more complicated because I need common denominators. But I see really quickly that I can convert this into a 10 on the bottom. So I'm going to do that, and then I'll have common denominators all the way down. So to get from 5 to 10, 5 times 2 will give me 10. So times 2 means times 2 on the top, which is just my negative stays, negative 2/10. And then on this one, 5 times 2 again, 3 times 2 is 6. So I have 2 6/10. Okay, so here are my 4 numbers when I'm looking on my number line. Or I can also do decimals. So 0.7 is a decimal, 1.8 is a decimal, and now I've got to get this 1/5 to a decimal. Remember, when we're talking decimals, we always report them in tenths or hundredths. So I've got to change this fraction into a tenth or a hundredth. And when I'm looking at it, tenth seems to be the easiest because I can just take 5 times 2, just the same as I did up here, and I'm going to take a times 2 and get negative 2/10, which is just like negative 0.2. And then negative 1 8/10. I already made it over here, but I got there. Oh, wait. I already did that one because it was a decimal already. So I need to work on this one. 2 3/5. Sorry, forgot what I was doing. We're making them all decimals. So here we go. That would be, I need a whole number 2, has 2 wholes. And now I need to report this, remember, in tenths or hundredths. So I'm going to choose tenths because it's easier. So 5 times 2 is 10. 3 times 2 is 6. 6/10, which I write as 0.6. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4 decimals now. So when I'm graphing this on the number line, I have 2 options. I can put these on the number line as decimals. I can put them on the number line as fractions. Either one is fine. Whichever one you would rather change them into. You do not have to change them into both. Pick a way that is easiest for you and change them all into fractions or change them all into decimals and then put them on the number line. I'm going to use the decimals for the number line because I just think that's a little easier. So if I'm thinking negative 0.7, here I am at 0, negative 0.7, that means it's not a whole 1. It's really close to it though. So I'm going to put my dot on the line, and then I also need to label it. Please do not just put a bunch of dots on your number line. That does not tell me what goes there. So I'm going to put negative 0.7. Then my next one, negative 1.8. So this tells me go to 0, negative 1, and then 0.8 tells me I'm almost to 2. So again, put my dot on the line and label it negative 1.8. I could do the same thing with these fractions that are here. They would just be labeled as negative 7/10 and negative 1 8/10. All right, that leaves me negative 2/10. So that tells me go to 0, and I'm still going negative 2/10. Let's think about that. If I have 7/10, if I have 2/10, that's closer to my 0. That's closer to being out of debt. Remember, we talked about our negative numbers tell us we're owing money. So this is like saying I only owe 20 cents or 2 cents comparing to 7 cents. All right, so negative 0.2. And then the last one is my only positive number, 2 6/10. So I'm starting at 0 over 2 6/10 means I'm a little bit over halfway. Point on the line and make sure you label it. Right? So let's see if I accomplish my goal. Graph the set of rational numbers on the number line. I've graphed them because I've put my dot on the line and I've labeled the value of each point. Right? Make sure those two things are done. So lots of steps there. We first had to get them in the same form. Then we had to graph them and make sure they're labeled. All right. So there you're going to find a check that goes with example 1. Also on page 216. So I'm going to give you time to work and then time to work this out with a partner as well. So if you'll go ahead and pause the video. All right, now with your partner, you're going to discuss which method did you use? Did you change all of these numbers into fractions or did you change them all into decimals? And then once you explain, make sure you show your graph so your partner can see where they've put this. All right, you've got 5. Find a partner that has the same color sleeves as you have on today. 4, 3, 2, 1. Grab a partner quickly. It doesn't matter if their sleeves match. And if you'll please pause the video, this should be a longer discussion. All right, let's see what you guys came up with. So I'm going to do both ways, and we'll see if my way matches what you guys got. So remember, you either had the option of doing all as fractions or all as decimals. So if you're my fraction people, if you chose fractions, here's what you should have explained to your partner. Well, -1 7/10 already a fraction. So we're going to leave that one. And 2/5 is already a fraction. However, they don't have the same denominator. So I'm going to real quick change that so that I can get this into a denominator that has 10. So to get from 5 to 10, I know that's a times 2. If I multiply times 2 on the bottom, got to multiply times 2 on the top. So there we go. 4/10. -1 7/10. So I've got 2 done. Now I need this 1 5/10. So 1 5/10. There's my third one. And then this one is a -6/10 because that 6 is in the 10th spot. Okay. So now I have them all as fractions and I can graph this on the number line. Right? If you were my fractions, make sure you have those same fractions written down. If you were my decimals, let's talk decimals. So far I have 1.5 as a decimal and I have -0.6 as a decimal. Now, I also have this fraction, which is -1. So 1 7/10. Remember, my 10th spot is right here. So 7/10 is just -1.7. And then 2/5 is my other one. Now this one's going to require a little more work because remember, when we're converting from a decimal or from a fraction to a decimal, we need to be able to read it in tenths or hundredths because of our place value. So I'm going to go ahead and do tenths because that seems like the closest here. So 5 times 2 is 10. 2 times 2 is 4. So that would be 4/10 or 0.4 because this is in the tenths spot. So now I have 4 decimals that I could graph. And again, if you are my decimal people, make sure you have those decimals and understand where they came from. If you have questions, please ask. All right, so my last task after getting them all into the same form is that they need to be put on the number line. So again, I like to do decimals on the number line because I think it's a little easier. So I'm going to do the decimal side, but if you did fractions, you're going to graph your fractions. So 1.5 or 1 5/10. So here I am. Over 1, 5/10 is just half. So remember, you need to label it 1.5. Or if you're doing your fractions, 1 5/10. Right? Check and make sure, did you put your dot on the line and do you have your number labeled? All right, next one, negative 0.6 or negative 6/10. So here I go. 0, it's a negative. 6/10 means it's not all the way to the -1, but it's a little more than that halfway mark. So I'm going to put my dot on the line and label it negative 0.6, or if you did fractions, negative 6/10. So we've put that one on the line. The next one is negative 1 7/10. So here I am at 0, negative 1 7/10. That means I'm not all the way to -2 yet, but I'm more than halfway. So I'm going to put it about there, negative 1.7 or negative 1 7/10. So I have that one on the line. Again, check and see, do you have your point on the line and is your number labeled? And the final one, 0.4. This is a positive number. So I'm going to go to my 0 and go positive. Now 0.4 4/10. That's not halfway, but it's really, really close. So I'm going to put 0.4, or if you chose the fractions, 4/10. I now have all 4 of my points in the same form. They are graphed. Their dots are on the line. Remember, they don't go in the air. And then they're labeled with their value. Make sure you write down their value and just don't put me dots on the number line. All right, we're going to stop there. That was a lot today. So here's going to be the goal. Here's what we covered today. You had to write each rational number in the same form, and then you had to graph it. So I'm going to give you an exit ticket that is very similar to example 1. Your job is to work out the exit ticket the best of your ability. I'm going to come back and look at these this afternoon and get an idea of exactly where we are on this understanding this concept. And then we'll go from there tomorrow, okay? So today on your assignment, exit tickets first. You are going to work on numbers 1 and 2 only. You can only do 1 and 2 because we've only done example 1. And remember, this says keep for tomorrow because you are supposed to keep this page until we're ready to turn it in. And we've only done a little part of this lesson. So once you finish 1 and 2, you're going to go to extra math, and you can always visit hands-on if all of your missing work that is finished and you are not on my missing work board over there. So please make sure you are asking if you need help. The sub will call you back to the table and meet with you back there. So if there is something you are struggling on, you'll be able to talk it through back there. And remember, keep this in a safe place. Exit ticket first, and then start on your list. And I will see you tomorrow.